Hello. Welcome back to another wonderful chapter of The Stars Above. As you can see, I'm wearing my shawl, my leopard shawl. I had mentioned in a previous video that in order to, get away from trying to live up to beauty standards by going to the tanning salon and eating Ozempic, that you should just go outside and venture off to your local desert and that you should just not wear very many clothes. I stand by that, but I also neglected to mention that you should bring sunscreen. I'm quite burnt, like a roasted tomato, so I'm wearing this shawl to protect myself from the sun. The sun has UV rays. UV rays will burn the skin. And then, shout out aloe vera. Aloe vera helps soothe the skin. Aloe vera for the skin. But yeah, still venture off into the desert, your local desert. But bring some sunscreen. SPF 30 plus, is probably the best move for you. Yeah. Anyways, on to today's beautiful chapter. Beautifully tragic, I should say. Today's sponsor is brought to you by I Have the High Ground. I Have the High Ground is today's sponsor, or find yourself on the high ground. Oftentimes in life, we fight these battles, these wars are waged, the warrior spirit needs to come out of us. 99.9% of the time, that battle is with oneself, whether conscious or subconscious, we fight these battles with ourselves. Unless that is you're a professional fighter, like MMA, boxing, judo, taekwondo. Perhaps you're a black belt in karate, sumo wrestling, WWF, WWE. Those are more staged fightings, but still, they're battles waged, even though they're staged. They're battles waged, even though they're staged. Or perhaps frat bros. Frat bros like to get into a lot of fights. They go to the bar, get very drunk off of Jägermeister. Frat bros like to do Jaeger bombs, I believe. And then they just fight people, And I'm going to go ahead and go out on a wild limb here, but I highly doubt that any frat bros are watching my videos. I don't think my audience is frat bros, but in case there happens to be a frat bro watching this, hey buddy, lay off on all the Jaeger bombs and the haymakers you are throwing, and perhaps read a book or something. I don't know. Do something else to challenge your aggression. Take it out on your cock. I don't know. Whatever you're doing out at the bars, tone it back. Yeah. I learned about this sponsor, I Have the High Ground, when I was just a wee lad in the movie theater. I was watching Star Wars Episode 3, I believe, And the wise Obi-Wan Kenobi was fighting Anakin Skywalker, and they were in a like a lava zone. There was a lot of lava, and Obi-Wan Kenobi was on this hill, and Anakin was on a flying disc, and Obi-Wan Kenobi had the high ground, and he said, "I have the high ground, Anakin." And Anakin, you know, very arrogant. Anakin was a bit of a frat bro. He had a little bit too many Jaeger bombs, and somebody looked at Padme. He thought Obi-Wan Kenobi looked at Padme wrong, you know, and so he's like, "That's my fucking girl, dog." And Obi-Wan Kenobi's like, "Listen, Anakin, I'm not trying to get with your girl. I have the high ground." And Anakin didn't listen because he was arrogant, you know? And so he tried to attack Obi-Wan Kenobi, who had the high ground, and he got his legs chopped off by a lightsaber. And Obi-Wan Kenobi just left him there, and inevitably this played out to Anakin becoming Darth Vader. You know, so shout out frat bros, you do not want to turn into Darth Vader. Lay off the Jaeger bombs and channel your angst in wiser ways. Nobody is looking at your Padme, okay? She's drunk off her fucking rocker, unattractive as shit, and nobody cares, okay? Nobody's looking at Padme because they want to steal your girl. They're looking at Padme because they're worried, and it's wintertime and she doesn't have a coat on and she's gonna catch a cold. So maybe be a better boyfriend. Get her a jacket, and stop fighting people after a few Jaeger bombs. Anyway, that's today's sponsor, having the high ground. You always want to have the high ground with the battle against oneself. Find a way to overcome by having the high ground. See where we are. Chapter 24, Uncomfortably Numb. The euphoria of addiction is fleeting. Sedation is bittersweet. The pleasantries of apathy. Long walks off short piers. Peaceful tumbles into the steep pits of self-destruction. Light air to breathe, light thoughts to have, light-hearted to feel, yet no light to be seen. As if floating on water above jagged rocks reaching for your every pass. Once sought ambition is stripped of recognition. Aloof to reason, keen on undoing. To feel is to choose, yet no choices bear fruit. A dose of nothingness to champion the perils of somethingness. Comfort only proves a momentary masking. Periods of release flash to despair as control is lost. It's only once realizing how far you've fallen and the irreparable damage caused that you begin to see there's no escape. We burrow deeper towards what relief remains at the reluctantly desperate hands of that next fix. My mother always lay blamed on our struggles on an old family curse passed down by our gypsy ancestors. As a child, she'd tuck me in late at night and share tall tales, just as her mother had. Generational lore of the nomadic shadows which came before us and would follow long after. "My little Icarus," she'd say, "they were magical caravanners cast out of commons and into the dark, who roamed countrysides in search of home. And so, we roam evermore." Had we become those shadows? I'd now begin to wonder. Perhaps those fables were a bad projection of my mother's undoing, only told to bring peace of mind in believing tragedy was never our fault, a scapegoat for the bloodline of storytellers carrying burdens of karmic debt. Whether real or not, like any other fairy tale read to me, I wouldn't be here today if not for believing her words held truth, deeper meaning, and higher purpose. Without fantasy, I'd be dead in a ditch by now, having tied off and shot up any problem ever faced. To believe oneself cursed is being spellbound to an idea only as strong as the fear it's fed, and the suffering it costs simply seeks to teach. To dispel is to accept that the trials faced are those we're capable of handling. If life was a breeze, there'd be no growth. And if not for growth, we'd never fully embrace life. Pain is a cruel teacher with good intentions, whose lessons aim to develop virtues most vital to the human experience. Will, patience, strength, courage, empathy, love, forgiveness, and so on. In realizing this, curses simply become magic gone mistaken. While spending New Year's at the Alibaba was a wake-up call for healthier resolutions, our fresh start came with a filthy slate. We were tired of running, tired of chasing, and tired of being tired. We sought deliverance from pain, but liberation of that magnitude comes solely from within, a lesson we'd been hopeless to grasp. While my mother may have been a product of her environment and programmed to fail, she lacked the will to prevail over her circumstances. It wouldn't have taken all the king's horses and all the king's men to put Humpty Dumpty back together again if he just quit sitting on that goddamn wall. When choosing to become our own worst enemy, what is sown shall be reaped. It took a bit of searching and a lot of help, but after 6 more months of living motel to motel, we'd finally have somewhere to call home again. A small condo in a decent area. A fantastic place to kick the shit and cut the crap, but living in environments comprised of drug addiction, abuse, and criminal activity for the better part of 2 years left me jaded. We'd really lean into the idea of getting things right this time around, but the pill of hypocrisy is easiest to choke on. Having dropped out of school for good and left to my own accord, attempts to escape the pain of reality hadn't improved within new walls showered with the same broken promises. The abuse of my mother's medications intensified, primarily towards benzos, my mistress of narcotics. I was taking anything that either started or ended with Zan, Zam, Pam, or Lamb. Wham bam, thank you ma'am. Benzos not only helped with separation from pain, but rid having to feel altogether. I sought so desperately to forget my past, run from the present, and withhold any chance for a future, that I'd managed to erase myself entirely. To put simply, I felt absolutely nothing. For me to take that pill meant rolling my eyes back into the sinking bogs of impassivity, where deceptions of freedom occupied dark realms of nihility. Consumed by dread, I became frightened of the world's harsh cruelties, having chosen to hide from them instead. I held no trust in people, stopped looking into their eyes, and hadn't sought connection. Without ties to anyone, there'd be no risk of feeling the inevitable pain which accompanied them, nor hold the fear of inflicting it. But like maggots to flesh, fleeing misery to chase abolishment only leads to a slow decay, until being eaten alive. As sedation spread like poisonous wildfire, my senses dulled, willpower numbed, mind collapsed, flame went out, heart grew cold, and spirit was emptied. Any flicker of imagination withered, wonders of fantasy faded, and peace within chaos became purely chaotic. There was no more magic felt or aspiration towards creation. I'd lost hope and forgotten my dreams. The nothing grew stronger. My endless worlds were left deserted, and Fantasia was dying. Not even the likes of the jesters remained, having abandoned them while forsaking their guidance and strength in favor of avoidance. In severing from a sense of self, their presence would flee from memory, banished to the uncharted chasms of a once prosperous soul. Thus far into life, the jesters symbolized profound characteristics of fortitude, aspects of truth in which I'd embody. The resilience against abuse, humor found in suffering, courage owned in defending my brother, and the guardian who stood for my mother. They weren't solely my protectors, but fought for those dear to me. Turning further to drugs only worked to suppress trauma, and by burying all the anger, fear, resentment, and hatred stemming from within, a monster was created comprised of it all, one who fed solely on attributes of misery, while having grown too strong to control. My family was falling apart at the seam. A search for purpose and hope for love became suffering at our own hands, being unable to let go of that which destroyed us, while pleading for reasons as to why it had. We hadn't been unified, but survived individually. Separate worlds, separate struggles, and separate ways to cope. Each branch grew so far from one another that there'd been no telling we were from the same tree. A desperate strive for inclusion warped into exclusion. But if looked at objectively, our experiences would have been indistinguishable from each other. Our sad realities coalesced to one perpetual nightmare which sought to fill a void through our own abusive tendencies of escapism. We rarely went out, and aside from to eat, never left our rooms. In choosing reclusiveness, we hid from the pain which waited outside the 4 walls protecting each of us, never having realized we trapped suffering within them. The house held an eerie silence devoid of life, and my mother was always high or strung out within the confines of her fortified bulwark. I hadn't dare open the door to her room in those days. Another one of my favorite movies as a child was Little Nemo. It's about a boy who's carried off in a zeppelin to the dream world of infinite possibilities, Slumberland, where he's crowned the prince. He's appointed one job above all else, to protect the golden key which opens every door in the kingdom. Nemo's warned to never open the door with a dragon insignia, until being tricked into it by a mischievous clown named Flip. The terrors of Nightmareland spill in, consuming the kingdom with darkness, and Nemo is tasked to defeat the Nightmare King. To me, Nightmareland came to represent what may lie on the other side of my mother's door, where even a peek through the keyhole was a haunting thought. What horrors might I find? Would I fixate wary eyes over the rubber tie around her bicep, or the syringe resting between her fingers? Chris was out of our lives, but could his claws still be around her neck? It wasn't as if I hadn't seen those things before, but perhaps a part of me yearned to believe it was all just a bad dream. However, nothing instilled more fear than the possibility of finding her lying lifeless with empty eyes looking back at me. To think turning that knob may reveal the realms of that chance, I could never open such a door, only hope that from upon the other side, she would. The air in that house was growing stale. We'd pressed our luck and outstayed welcome, having become too comfortable. It was time to scram, so the powers that be knocked with an iron fist. I was sitting on the back patio enjoying lunch, when what looked to be a fully suited SWAT team ran up the hill to our balcony, each carrying weaponry as if to ambush a cartel stash house. I ran back inside to pounding on the front door. "Sheriff's Department," they yelled. "We have a warrant." I got halfway up the stairs before the door burst off its hinges, and a raging battalion of rifle-carrying deputies stormed in. If cops weren't so inclined to scare the ever-living shit out of people, I may have been willing to answer a polite knock. But the sudden appearance of a cavalry tends to trigger an inevitable game of hide-and-seek one only plays to lose. I didn't yell to alarm my mother, nor run to provide safety at her side. Where had the once strong, guardian son gone? He was numb, in that righteous role, all but forgotten. I froze on the stairs, dropping to the floor like a narco who just railed his final, heart-bursting slug of disco dandruff. $1.50, 16-year-old me laid pinned by an overgeared and overzealous 250-pound honky, straddling me like a mechanical fucking bull. I suppose those goddamn greasy warthogs must follow protocol to chase pensions. It's a good thing we weren't running amok, or they may have seen it fit to toss tear gas grenades into my family's unsuspecting rooms. In all fairness, after being rounded up like cattle and watching them hog-tie my mother, they were rather cordial. They brought Evan and I downstairs while things were sorted out. "What is it you want to be when you grow up?" an officer asked me. "Man," I said, "it'd be real cool if suited up like you to protect and serve the innocent." "We do what we can to help those in need." "I can only imagine." "You're a good sport, kid. You'll make a fine deputy one day." Yes, what in Sam hell would my family have done without them barging in to wake the dead? How would my mother have safely gone about her day without a knee pad crushing her skull first? What a relief they'd been. That conversation was a load of shit spewed from my boot-licking mouth, but chewing the fat opened a level of communication. Cops are simple-minded creatures of simple-minded nature. When shown you can relate on some level while demonstrating obedience, they'll typically reciprocate. I've met many respectable officers who do a great service for their community, but have dealt with heaps who should be strung up, tarred and feathered. If being respectable doesn't work, they just need to be treated like the gods they see themselves to be. Fuck cops will never be beneficial to proclaim in front of cops. It doesn't matter what rights you think you have. It's best to just keep that slimy trap shut. For the second time, I hadn't known the cause behind their raid. If they were looking for drugs, they would have found them, unless my mother did them. Perhaps the sheriff's department was conducting widespread searches for people who skipped bail or had outstanding warrants. Maybe she was too high or strung out to remember a court appearance, or intentionally missed a drug screening with her probation officer. Whatever the case may have been, they were empathetic towards our situation and lenient with a single mother. We'd lucked out, but our streak ended with another landlord fuming over their smashed-in door. Being 2 for 2, we were evicted and back on the streets. Aside from any more raids, this rinse and repeat cycle continued over the next several years. It seemed we really had become those nomadic shadows and trustless gypsies, having never felt comfortable in one place for too long. Whatever home represented, it was with each other. whether under a roof, in between suitcases, or out of cars with cramped back seats. But as the years progressed, so did my mother's efforts to do better as a parent. She always strived to make up for her mistakes, even if holding on to them far too tightly to truly let go. The dynamic of our family began shifting, and the higher my mother climbed, the deeper her kids sank. Our destructive tendencies branched in different directions. I plummeted further into avoidance and seclusion, while Evan turned to a faster-paced lifestyle of drugs, partying, and crime. I'd often find my mother sitting by the phone in late hours, panicking over his whereabouts while waiting to get that call every parent dreads. I used to wonder if that gave her an idea of how we must have felt waking without her there. If feeling that deep gut worry as a mother, one entirely out of her control, brought insight on the pain it caused her children. Over time, dependence on medication intensified. I was able to get high on my mother's supply for years, but the better she found herself, the less access I had. While there was still a steady flow of amphetamines and benzos, I was also dealing with opiate addiction. And in doing her best to kick heroin, my mother cut back on her use of pills like Vicodin and Norco. I may have experienced a lot of physical pain growing up, but nothing compared to the drawn-out body aches, sharp stomach pains, tremors, and nausea that came with opiate withdrawals. At 18, I developed chronic migraines, which led to dependency on Excedrin. I'd take upwards of 12 extra-strength pills a day to subside the pain, which caused severe sleep disorders. Bouts of insomnia so unbearable that I'd inflict physical harm on myself. The pain of being attentive for days on end was intolerable. Intolerable. And the mental exhaustion, suffocating. My sense of awareness was a perpetual haze, having been unable to differentiate wakened states from an ever-vivid, ongoing dream. But the terror of sleep-deprived hallucinations made it much more like a nightmare, never having known what was real and what wasn't. This led to my being prescribed anti-anxiety and sleep aid medications like Lunesta, Ambien, and Xanax. I'd take several of them and would sleep for 12 to 14 hours at a time, while waking in chaotic headspaces of uncertainty. Poor daily routine attributed heavily to my ongoing health concerns. I kept locked away in a pitch-black room, the only light being retained having been from an overstimulating computer screen. While detrimental to my well-being, hiding from the world was the only way I knew how to cope with it. But substance abuse and escapism led to an unprecedented cynicism within me. This tainted perspective wasn't only directed at the world, but impaired the trust and belief held from my own family. In becoming alienated from myself, I no longer held purpose or faith in fulfillment. The pent-up aggression, frustration, and anguish became far too overwhelming, and those vile emotions began targeting the one I swore to protect them from. The guardian son had perished, and the monster within the man was growing. Meanwhile, my mother began a search for salvation outside of herself. When believed truly lost, there's no reach closer than what is felt can be grasped before us, and no reach further than what's held inside. An internal battle which never ceases to wage until that understanding comes to fruition. But why choose to fight when easier paths have been laid? Religion being the simplest of routes for those who seek repentance. So, if my mother couldn't forgive herself, then perhaps God would. I absolutely believe in the higher power of a nameless God. Our expanding universe is its own cosmic entity, but that power resides within all of us just as well. One must solely seek inward to understand how to harness this, for comparable discoveries of such marvel lie nowhere else. Now, I'm not saying that faith held outside of ourselves holds no value, but to trust in the unwavering belief of oneself holds certainty. We're far more capable of far more than we know. The events of our past may have cause and effect for the pain we bear, but they're not regrets needed to carry us forward, nor are they circumstances to fear will persist, lest given the freedom. We'll always possess the chance to make amends, not only with those we love, but ourselves. While my mother may have sought religion for her resolve, it wouldn't prove fruitful. Salvation came with the power of making a conscious choice, one she believed would give her the chance to turn back time, begin again, and finally make things right. As you can see, I have the high ground. So I battled this chapter, reading this chapter, subconscious conscious battle of having the high ground. You know, because it was a, Icarus is very obviously going through it. He's battling with addiction. He's battling with emotional apathy. I would argue that apathy is one of the most concerning things to not feel, if you catch my drift. Being sad and depressed is a very natural feeling. You know, everyone processes it in a different way. And it is to be appreciated. You know, that's human emotion. That is, embrace the sadness, you know, and allow yourself to feel everything you feel in every way. It is a problem once you become apathetic. Once you feel nothing at all, then there is cause for alarm. That is not good, and you don't want that. That's why you always want to have the high ground. Apathy is no good. Have the high ground. Best to have a lightsaber. You do not want to fall to the dark side. You do not want to become Darth Vader. One might say Darth Vader had. I don't know what Darth Vader was going through, but I'm sure at some point he felt apathy, and that may have been a contributing factor to his dominion over the dark side. I don't want to get into the lore of Star Wars. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to read a beautiful story called The Stars Above. It's not called Star Wars. Star Wars is great, but we're not here to talk about Star Wars. We're here to talk about the stars above. Point being, always have the high ground when dealing with the battles against oneself. You know? Realize that even if you're down in the dumps, down on your luck, down bad, down and out, just stand up. Just stand up. And then you have the high ground, you know? And then things are much clearer because you can see it much better than if you are down in the dumps looking up. The sun is in your fucking eyeballs and you can't see. Things are not as clear. All of a sudden you're apathetic. You don't want that. So just stand up, turn away from the sun. Don't be blinded and look at yourself in a clearer light. Gain some perspective. Things will be all right. Because you have the high ground. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today for another lovely chapter of The Stars Above. Just gonna toss this guy down here. I will get that. I'm a little, like I've said, I'm deathly afraid of heights, so this was challenging for me. You know, but this is also the best seat in the house. The needles are so fucking beautiful, and I could lounge here, not comfortably, but I could lounge here like this, take it all in. You know, somebody could draw me like one of your French girls, whatever. We've already gone over that. I don't need to get back into that. Anyway, I'm going to make my way out in the safest possible way I can by hopping over this. And I'll catch you guys later. Thanks so much for joining us on today's episode of The Stars Above. Stay low, stay limber. I'm not a limber guy, but as long as you stay low, you'll be all right.